Hello, everybody, and welcome to the new year and a new episode of Just Another G.I. Joe Show, episode number 24. We are back again. We took a break and we decided to come back because Saturday nights are just not the same anymore. I am your host, Mike. You can refer to me now as Tiger Force Mike. I have claimed that name as Tiger Force Mike, and we're going to introduce my good friend, Fred, as we're going to call him Battle Force Fred.
Hey guys, it's Fred from JBL. Yes, I'm still here. Mike hasn't run me off with his errant talk of feline-themed repaints. So, likes to have me do. You can find me pretty much everywhere at Joe Battle Lines, on the web, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Google Plus for anybody who still uses it. And we have a very special guest with us tonight. When we were talking about people that we wanted and topics and guests to bring on, we decided we're going to go to what many people in the fandom refer to as the definitive online G.I. Joe resource. And so we have with us tonight Terry Dizard from YoJoe.com. So Terry, welcome. Thank you for coming on and putting up with, in advance, for putting up with us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. This is great.
And, look, as I said on that little partial intro there, when it comes to the online G.I. Joe community, there is one site. I mean, we have different Facebook groups and different forums and things like that, but there's one site that the entire community agrees with. And really our fandom, and I'm not just saying this because you're on, that our fandom is blessed to have, because a lot of other fandoms don't have a similar resource, and that is YoJoe. It's where we all go for referencing figure versions and comics and all of that. I mean, it's kind of the nexus of our fandom. So can you tell us a little bit? I mean, I know YoJoe is one of the older sites. It's actually the oldest Joe site that I can think of that's still active. Can you tell us a little bit about, for those people who aren't familiar, about how YoJoe came to be?
Sure. So I'm the sort of like the third generation of administrator for YoJoe. Initially, it was started by 3 people in the very early days of the internet back on Usenet. There was a website that specialized in action figures, just photos of action figures listed by year, and that was run by Eugene's son, who's no longer active in the community. And then there was a file cards and a customs portion of the site, and that was run by Corey Stinson of smalljoes.com. And then there was a third person who was responsible for infrastructure, financing of the servers, all that kind of stuff. And that was a guy named Connor Malone, who sort of retained overall ownership of the website. And then Corey bowed out in 2001 to start up Small Joes. And then Eugene left in 2002. And then Connor sold the site in 2004 to our parent company. And the parent company is who I work for now. I was hired shortly after the initial buyout. We're owned by a company called Action Online, and Action Online is responsible for keeping the servers up online. They're responsible for managing all of our ad revenue and everything, and that keeps the site going day to day. And so, really ask away. Like, what kind of questions what do you want to know? I mean, we take pictures of toys and we put them online, and we get lots of people that look at it from every industry. Comic book artists to writers, to everybody uses YoJoe as their key resource, and that's something that we're really proud of. We put a lot of work in building the database up.
I've actually used YoJoe plenty of times to if I've gotten parts mixed up, is always go there and look and see which part went to which figure and stuff of that nature. So it's been helpful for me.
And so, and again, what Mike said is that's pretty much, I think, how a lot of us came to YoJoe. And, I always love it when you're on a group and, older fans, especially with newer G.I. Joe fans, hey, what's this figure? And what's everybody's first answer? YoJoe. And it's usually a direct link. So
yep.
How how did how did this all come together of, of organizing all these disparate components, and putting this together and then making this database? I mean, like, how, I guess my question is, this is a job for you, but it's also a passion project. I can tell by the back shelf back there.
Yeah.
How much time do you spend a week on YoJoe?
It really varies. When Hasbro releases like a new wave or a new assortment, it's rough. Like, we are scrambling, getting our hands on product, getting it put in our photo booth. My co-admin Philip Donnelly does the majority of our photography work, and so Philip will go in and we break it out. Who's going to do what? Who's going to edit the photos? He gets them taken, and then we just scramble and get it put up there. The biggest thing is, G.I. Joe is blessed with the product catalogs in the 1980s. Like, those inserts that were included is really sort of the basis for YoJoe. Every year you got a catalog, and it had the figures and the vehicles that were going to be released throughout that upcoming year. And that served as the chronological basis for YoJoe. So what it comes down to is me and my kind of committee of admins and experts sit down and figure out, where does a new release fall into its era. For example, some of the things that were released in 2012, we had things that came out in 2013, things that were re-released in different packaging. What year does it fall into? And so there's a lot of discussions on how to build that database out. And then, originally YoJoe was built all in hand-coded HTML web pages. When we wanted to go create an entry, we had to create a blank web page, copy the header data over, drag and drop the images into it, do everything by hand. Every page was hand created. And at the time, before we made a major upgrade in 2011, we had about, I want to say, 5,000 pages. We had about 25,000 images. And so it all had to be, so in 2011, we went and did a major upgrade. We were able to secure some financing, and we put in a very expensive, very huge total rebuild of YoJoe. And that included moving over all of the figures, all of the vehicles, all of the accessories, all of that data that had to be moved over, and it had to be moved over by hand so it could be put into a SQL database. And so today, when you look at YoJoe, it's not really a website. It's more like a piece of software. Where you have the integration of the collection management system, which is something we can talk about in a little bit. And then you have all these items built into a relational database, where we have to go and we have to figure out, you have, well, if I were to take a look, how many different versions of Snake Eyes are there right now?
Oh, geez.
Yeah. I mean, when we break it down, we start talking about how many figures there are and how we built this out. We came up with a really interesting way of doing this. And so I'm just going to pull that up, take a look. We have Snake Eyes version 1, and we go down to Snake Eyes version 68, 2014.
Jesus.
That was the last one. And so how we do this is we break everything down by character. That's the beginning of the tree on how we track all this. And we build this out. So you have a character like Snake Eyes. And in the database, we just add a version to that character. Now, what's interesting, though, is we had to build in some flexibility with the software, because we go into 2006 and Snake Eyes was given the name of Classified. So how do you keep a version, technically version 1 of the figure classified, but it was the 28th version of Snake Eyes, 28th figure release. And so we had to do a lot of manipulation in the software and the database architecture to make that work. You can do things in HTML by hand that are a lot harder to do with the database. And so that's how we build those figure pages and those characters. So then you have other things like vehicles. How many different versions of the Vamp are there? And if I go and we take a look at that, and I wish we could have done some screen sharing beforehand. So you can take a look at what I see. But again, this just kind of hammers home the point that YoJoe is no longer a website. It's really a piece of software. There's about 12, 14 versions of the Vamp. And that's just the Vamp. That's not counting the Stinger, the Dreadnought Assault, the Tiger Sting, the Mortal Kombat Street Striker, which, that typically is a G.I. Joe vehicle, but we do put all those G.I. Joe tools into the site. And so you have just this massive amount of information, and it takes a village to come together. My team and I, and we figure out what goes where. And there's a lot of arguing. This shouldn't be there. This should be somewhere else. And really, it's one of those things where behind the scenes, and people saw what we had to do just to get a single figure up. It's a lot of work. It's hours, tens of hours to get items up on there.
Quick question while you brought that up. The different versions, all your versions, does that include what the Collectors Club and JoeCon have done as well?
Yes.
Okay.
That's everything. The things that we do not include are fan-made convention figures. I worked, and this does bother some people, but we decided to omit the DeSimone early 90s convention items because they were basically mass-produced customs. They were mail-order figures. They were hand-painted. They were put in baggies or little boxes and handed out. And it's not a Hasbro product. It was, and so you have lots of other fan get-togethers and fan things over the years that have done the same thing. And we'd like to find a place for it, but it's not going to be in the main database. It'll be off to the side.
And is it safe to say, because that YoJoe's primary focus, because of the name, is the Real American Hero, Hasbro produced Real American Hero, and then variations on that, all mass produced?
Our primary focus is whatever is currently in the market at the time. So Today it's 3 3/4 inch, 4-inch figures. Tomorrow it could be whatever Hasbro decides to do. We have spent the last decade, really, since 2011, going back and bringing in all of the original 1964, 1970s, everything to fill in the 12-inch gap. And this is an ongoing project because the 12-inch community is really great on vintage items, but getting those 90s to early 2000s, there's so many different retailer exclusives and variations, and there's no YoJoe for the 12-inch line, and so that kind of falls on our shoulders, and that's going to be a project that's going to take us reasonably years to put together.
Oh yeah, definitely.
There were so many items that were released between 1995 and 2002 in the 12-inch line, and really that line continued on well into 2009 in the Rise of Cobra film. So you have we have a pretty good handle on all of the Real American Hero type characters. So those 12-inch figures, we have a fairly comprehensive database of. But the generic things, and then you have the Hollywood heroes like Bob Hope, and then so on and so on. You have massive, what's called the classic collection, and then the later 2003, 2004 items. That's just it's going to take us years to like that reasonably, unless somebody is going to volunteer. And YoJoe's run by volunteers. We all volunteer for this. It's not a paid position. We work with a parent company, but our focus is keeping the information online. It's not about making money. So everybody that works there, it's a volunteer. And somebody wants to come up with that information for us for the vintage or the modern 12-inch, well, we would love to take that labor and incorporate it into the site.
And that brings up an excellent point, is that whenever you see people online who, let's face it, people get impatient. Something's out and it's not on YoJoe instantaneously, that you are a volunteer organization. And so it is a labor of love. Because I look in the background and I can tell that, G.I. Joe is a passion for everyone that works there. If someone wanted to volunteer in some capacity to help on YoJoe. And I know if you go through the site, you'll see, the comic section is curated by someone. There are people that specialize in areas. How would someone go about, contacting YoJoe and saying, hey, you know what? I love what you do. How can I give back?
Well, the best thing to do is reach out to me personally. Either leave a message on the Facebook YoJoe page, or they can find me through social media and get in touch with me. And then we'll sit down and we'll figure out, what are your areas of expertise. Our biggest problem, and it sounds kind of snobbish, but we have a guideline that we use for quality control. Because before we would take, the YoJoe back in the early 2000s would take any submission. We needed to get the content up there so that the information was preserved. Today, though, you'll see that we've spent countless hours going back and remastering all of our vintage vehicles, our vintage figures. Phil and I have gone back and taken just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photos to to update this, to bring it up to a higher standard, because we want this to be the definitive database for the history of the G.I. Joe brand, all of its incarnations and products. So one of the biggest issues with volunteers is it's not just the passion, but it's the technical skill. Whether you're skilled in photography, Photoshop, and editing, or if you are just able to supply, samples of things like variations. We have lots of well-known names in the community that work with us hand in hand. When they find a variation, they find something, we sit down and we analyze it, we look for samples, and then sometimes we'll sit on a variation for 5-6 years until we get enough samples and enough verification, because we don't want to put incorrect information up on YoJoe. And that's part of our...
I was going to say, I think that's part of the reason that, if it's on YoJoe, it's considered definitive. And I think that's the reason why, again, everyone from figure reviewers to just fans in the community, when they want to reference something, often imitated, never duplicated,
Yes.
The expression, is that there have been other attempts to do this over the years. And I remember individuals trying to do this, and they never got very far, because I think once they got into it, the more you learn, you have to learn. You realize suddenly, wow, just because you may see this up front, there's so much more behind the scenes. And that's why I was glad we talked about the database side of this, that YoJoe isn't just HTML pages, that it is a relational database.
Yes.
Of information and images. Have you now? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there were multiple sites that have attempted to do this, and we encourage anybody, if they want to bring forward information and do their own project, it only makes the community better. There's room for other sites. YoJoe doesn't intend to be the one and only G.I. Joe site out there, but like you said, once you dig into it, there's such a fine nuance into just production variations, for example, or into cardbacks and cardback information. There's so much information that not one person or one small group of people could really duplicate what YoJoe does. And it's taken us, this is our 20th anniversary this year.
Wow.
Technically, we came online in October. We actually had to get a hold of the original administrators, and even they weren't totally sure. But we went back, we looked at for the very first mentions of YoJoe on Usenet, and we have it pegged down to, I think, October 6th, 1997 was when the site first went online. And yeah, you have 20 years of people volunteering. You're not ever going to be able to duplicate that, especially quickly, to be where it's going to be competitive to the information that YoJoe provides. It would take an army of people to do that. And even then, copy the data off YoJoe to get it right in the first place.
And if you think about it, 20 years in terms of the internet, for those of you who have not been on the internet, who've had the internet your whole life, that is ancient in terms of the internet. I can't tell you how many sites that I remember when I was first getting involved in the online fandom, which was in the late 90s, and getting involved in the internet, and how few of those sites are even still around anymore. So it is a testament to the people that have worked on this project that YoJoe is even just still there. That really says a lot about the commitment and the time and everything that's gone into it. Now, over the years that YoJoe has been involved, it's used as a site for verification. We talked about this when a variation is found, and there's the authentication process and everything. What are some of what would you consider one of your successes in bringing something to light that people may not have been aware about?
For me personally,
that you guys are really proud of.
Well, for me personally, one of the things that I think is kind of funny is when I sit down and I take a look and I discuss it over with people, a change that we want to make. For example, about 10 years ago, I looked at the swivel arm figures and I said, these aren't variations. These are complete new figures for 1983. But they're not the second version, because the community at that point had established like the 1985 version of Snake Eyes was the second version of Snake Eyes. So how do I rationalize that? And so we came up with the version 1.5. It's a little inelegant, but it was a completely new manufacturer and it was a new release. And there's a lot of technicalities that goes into a decision like that. And then to look on eBay 6 months later and something we thought up of just sitting around talking on the phone became how everybody labels something. And it's interesting to see that decisions that YoJoe makes affects the broader secondary, collector's market. And, that's a lot of responsibility that we have to make sure that when we do something, we do it right and it makes sense, that it's logical and that it falls in line with what Hasbro did at the time. And we've built some really great relationships. So if we have a question on something, we can go to a designer, we can go to a brand manager and say, hey, this is what we're thinking. Can you verify this? And so we can get it right from the horse's mouth. This is what this is the fact. And that's something that YoJoe's worked really hard on, is cultivating that relationship with the community and with, the powers that are far above us.
Now, we mentioned earlier, there aren't many other fandoms that can boast such a resource like this. In fact, I'm really hard pressed to come up off the top of my head with any of them. For Star Wars, there are multiple sites, but it's not quite as definitive. Has YoJoe, and I can understand if this is something you can or cannot disclose, but have you ever been approached by someone from another fandom, who said, hey, look, we love the model that you guys have for G.I. Joe. We want to do that for brand X. How, have you ever had like an opportunity to consult like that, or?
We have looked at some projects in the past as far as the company goes. Like with our parent company, did we want to branch out into other brands and other products? And, it's difficult because the amount of labor that's required. You need a community of experts to do that. The Star Wars community has a fantastic site, and like Rebel Scum, they do a really good job photography-wise, but they picked a very unusual way of breaking their line down. YoJoe follows a model of doing things by year, and like Rebel Scum does it by assortment, or by release name. So you'll have a 2008 through 2010 line that they'll call, I don't know, Classic Collection or something in Star Wars. And that makes it very difficult for a person who goes through a box of loose figures, it says, oh, hey, look, here's a Anakin Skywalker. What line did this come from? A date stamp isn't going to help. They have to know what series that came from. And that's such an esoteric knowledge that they're not going to need a reference site if they knew that in the first place. And so it's difficult. Transformers is something that I think you could find an equal with in G.I. Joe. They released on an annual basis. They broke their assortments up by year. But again, it would require such a family of knowledgeable experts to come forward with, and then to own the items, to take the photographs, to put this together, you know, and that's hard to replicate. You know, communities have lots of passion, but everybody kind of wants to be, you know, the big fish in the small pond. And YoJoe's a little different. It's a community that came together. It's community sourced, it's community driven, and it's you guys that keep YoJoe going. It isn't us. We're just facilitators, you know. And that's really what it comes down to. It's any community that wants to replicate it. Good luck. You know, you have our well.
So, and this is something else. Okay, so you mentioned the parent company. You know, someone that's helping to keep the lights and the servers humming.
Right.
You know, anyone that's ever built a website knows that, you know, it takes money to, you know, you don't run a website for free. You know, even Wikipedia every year comes out and has a button at the top where they ask their members, you know, PBS style to contribute. You know, YoJoe has advertising on the site, which helps support it. But there's also another way that you have to help support the site. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
So this goes back to about 2011. And this was something that we were factoring in when we were building out the new databases. We were making this major technological leap for YoJoe. It's the definitive collector's information resource. How can we make this a little more personalized for individual collectors? And so we came up with what we call the YoJoe Pro collection management system. And this allows you to take your YoJoe account, which anybody can sign up for free. And for paying members, I think it's $3 a month. It's very low cost. And then there's, you know, a 2-year and a 3-year plan that people can buy into as well. It allows you to track all of the figures that you own, plus the figures and vehicles that you want. So, as well as comic books. So if you have your comic book collection, your figures, your vehicles, you can personalize your entire G.I. Joe collection and keep track of it. You can also upload your own photos to your own personal collector database. And that's something that we wanted to do to personalize the experience a little bit, but also give some value add options to the site. And the reason why is internet ad revenue isn't always dependable and reliable. You know, you get lots of views, you try to work out contracts with different sponsors, but as a site becomes more popular, the more expensive it becomes to run. And so the way that we looked at it is, if this is really the community website that's, you know, built by the community for the community, and the community would be willing to, you know, buy into a very low cost, you know, digital good that gave them benefit. And that's what YoJoe Pro was, a low cost product that you would be able to buy into, and your support directly keeps the site online. You know, it's not, I'm not getting rich off it. You're not buying from my collection. You know, it just keeps our bills, and it keeps the site online, and it gives us some opportunity to, you know, build on new things, some new projects. You know, something I would love to see happen, but it would require a fairly significant investment, is to move YoJoe from being a you know, desktop computer-based website and move it into a smartphone and tablet app. You know, that's the next evolution, to be able to take your YoJoe app, scan over your collection, take photos of it, catalog it, and then with our buy, sell, trade system, list the items you have for sale for other collectors to view, and connect those relationships between people who have, you know, things they want to sell and people that are looking to buy. YoJoe can be that middleman broker for that. But we're going to need a lot more community response to YoJoe Pro before we can make that next jump. That's not financially feasible at the moment. But,
and so YoJoe Pro, for people who are following along, I mean, you said it's $3 a month.
Right.
Which you know, it's you skip one Starbucks trip a month.
Oh yeah, it's a cup of coffee.
And you funded it.
Yep, absolutely. And that was really important for me when we were designing this, because I wanted something that was going to be very low cost. It couldn't be super high end. It couldn't be comparable to like a G.I. Joe Club membership at $40 a year. you know, it isn't feasible to have, you know, a $80 or $90 product because people aren't going to buy into it. But for, you know, $3 a month, or I'd have to take a look at what our price breakdowns are. I know that we've been making some modifications to that. But here goes subscription. Yeah, it's $3 a month, $30 a year, or $55 for every 2 years. So that's pretty darn inexpensive. But the amount of good that does, I don't think the community realizes that keeps YoJoe online. And if you want to keep that resource available, it's just like you said, just like PBS, just like NPR. You know, when you're sponsored by the community, you know, it takes community involvement to keep it going.
I think I love the NPR example as someone who listens to a lot of public radio, because really, you know, that's YoJoe in many ways is that source of information, and it is that, you know, that resource. And again, I'm a book guy. I love having books, you know, of you know, resource books, and there are a lot of good ones out there for Joe. At the same time, my starting point is usually, is my tablet getting good enough reception in the basement? You know, and I'm on YoJoe and I'm scrolling through to double check something, because
books are wonderful because it's tangible. And I've noticed in our community, it's a little less tech savvy sometimes, so they like having books, and that makes sense. But you're limited on the number of pages, and a book can't be updated, you know, on the fly when a new variation is discovered or is released, you know, and it's not going to automatically update itself when a whole new assortment comes out. And so it's sort of trying to convince the community that, you know, books are wonderful and you should definitely support the authors, because they're, you know, from our community, from our very small community, actually. When you compare it to Star Wars or G.I. Joe, or Star Wars or Transformers, G.I. Joe is really a tightly knit, very unique community. And yeah, give us money.
That's the commercial plug, guys, and it's true. I mean,
but yeah,
I
go ahead.
I was gonna say I would challenge any Joe fan out there to say they have never been on the site. It is really that unifying. I don't want to just turn this into a rah-rah commercial,
no.
but it's true. It's true. You know, I mean, again, as someone who's been online and in some sort of fandom since the late 90s, I remember the first time I discovered YoJoe, and it was like, wow. And then I went looking for other sites for like Star Wars and things, and like you mentioned, I love Rebel Scum, but I get lost trying to find something by assortment where, man, I can go by year, and you know, that makes it easy. That makes it so easy.
On vintage Joe figures with a date stamp, you know, that's one of the things that we put in there was a date stamp identifier. This goes way back, like years ago, and it's not really something that's used too much anymore. But you could look at a date stamp on a figure and kind of figure out roughly, you know, the year that it was released, or, you know, the year prior, and it gave you a starting point, you know, to dig through the archive. And so that's something you're missing with Star Wars figures, with Transformers, is it's just very difficult to navigate and to find what's what. And then, you know, G.I. Joe had this issue in the 2000s where we were getting a lot of re-releases, and those date stamps weren't getting updated. And so it makes finding those figures a lot more difficult. But you know, we have some tools that work around that as well for people to search through, whether it be by color.
I remember back in the day when, and it was probably before 2011, you also had the Who-Bit.
That's still there.
Fire feature.
Yep.
And is that, I noticed like on figures now, you know, you know, is there eventually going to be that full cross-linking of a part, you know, all the way from a modern, you know, someday is it going to be where we can click on a particular weapon and go through and see all the time, just like we can with all the Snake Eyes releases, or, you know, that, is that going to be expanded eventually as well?
That's in the plan. Right now, the original Who-Bit goes from 1982 until about 2004. So it covers, you know, three main eras in GI Joe of the 3 3/4-inch figures, but it's one of these things where the technology is there, but the manpower and the expertise and the time isn't. To do this, we're going to have to rephotograph all of the accessories, which is something that we're doing right now as we are updating old entries. If you were to go take a look a year ago at 1985 in the action figure database, you would notice that most of those figures were from like 1997, how old those were. And today, you go look at 1985, and every figure except for one has been updated to a whole new photography standard. So we're getting there. We're getting that raw data that we need before we can start expanding into these more advanced search features. By having a relational database, it'll make building that out a lot easier, but it's a time thing. And so we have to take a look at where do we put our time. And if I put my time into building up a Who-Bit and not updating the figures, well, we'll have the infrastructure, but not the images. So it's sort of which comes first. And in this case,
figures come first, and which makes perfect sense. That's probably the most searched feature on the site.
Yep.
For a lot of people too, YoJoe is not just the figures. You also cover the printed materials. You also cover the comics, which is a whole nother exhaustive branch of GI Joe when you're dealing with multiple publishers and titles, and you have a whole separate group of volunteers that seem to work even in that realm as well.
Yes, that's one of the things that when I took over YoJoe in late 2004, early 2005, my big focus was to find people that wanted to work with YoJoe, that were experts in their field, and then sort of give them ownership in their own department. So while Phil and I focus on figures, we have other people that work on comic books, other people that work on vehicles, and other people that just do variations. And so we kind of built this trust of knowledge. And so we have a small team that works on just getting the comics updated every month. And when you have 2, 3, 4 different books coming out every month, and then for a while this past year, you have Mask and ROM and Micronauts, and I'm just looking through it. Transformers Till All Are One, and the Revolution Action Man series, and Transformers Lost Light. And we can keep going, and you'll see that there's so many crossover comics right now in this combined Hasbro universe. It takes a lot of manpower to read all these comics and then only put in the ones that pertain to GI Joe, because we want it to be that exhaustive, complete database.
With that being said, on the comic end, you when you're doing comics, in essence, there's not really going to be a shared universe as much anymore of GI Joe, with them canceling Scarlet First Strike, or was it Scarlet
Strike Force?
Strike Force. So that just leaves what really just a Real American Hero?
Yeah, for right now, it's just a Real American Hero until IDW decides what next, what direction they're going to take their Hasbro Universe line into. So we'll see what that's going to be. And it's only going to be a matter of time until that happens.
Right. And with that said, let's get into maybe kind of like a little touchy subject for some people, maybe not, but YoJoe was pretty much, let's be honest, y'all were kind of the flagship in the whole Aubrey situation with the 9/11 statement. Y'all pretty much made the first statement, and pretty much y'all were and I'm not sure, was it you per se, or was it the comic division? Was it someone somewhere, or how did that come to the point to where y'all said, okay, we're putting our foot down. We are not going to stand for this. This is what GI Joe is not about. This is what we want.
Right. What happened is we're all active in the community. Right. We all are. We're all on Facebook groups together. All of us, GI Joe is a tightly knit community. We're all friends. We all go to JoeCon together. We hang out together. It's about relationships. And the GI Joe community has had a history of being really open and really great with its content creators. You know, people can reach out to Larry Hama and he responds to them. People can reach out and interact with Hasbro and you get responses. And that's something that we've been very, very fortunate in that. You know, a Star Wars fan can't reach out to George Lucas and get a response. It's just not going to happen. You know, or Disney as it is today. So part of that openness is this sort of give and take in communication. There's going to be feedback from the community, and there's going to be content creators who may reach out to the community for ideas, or may even ask them for help. Hey, we're working on something. A little over a year ago, we had an issue with the writer on the current G.I. Joe book, where they went into a couple of the online forums, Facebook groups, places like that, and made some really sort of trolling comments. And that was kind of I'm not sure how to word it. It caught our attention. Like, why would you want to go and communicate with the community just to end up with sort of a flame war going on? Everybody's upset. Nobody's happy with the feedback. It's just sort of an ugly situation. And that happened not once or twice, but multiple times between January of last year through September. And what really did it is the author of the G.I. Joe books at the time, Aubrey Sitterson, was using his social media accounts to both promote Hasbro products that he was working on, as well as his personal products, his personal opinion, other things that maybe were not appropriate to have associated with the G.I. Joe brand. And as a community, we're all very protective of G.I. Joe, what we think it should be, what we think it shouldn't be. And for me personally, I got a lot of feedback from the community. By a lot, I mean phone calls, emails, messages through Facebook, messages through other media. We received a lot of feedback. People were very upset by some comments that were made. And something needed to be said. We couldn't reach a dialogue with Aubrey. It wasn't possible at that point because people that had different opinions were just automatically banned or blocked by him. That's the case on his social media. So after looking at this, looking at the feedback, looking at the history of negative interactions and comments, I made the decision that YoJoe was going to just stop for a while our free, uncompensated media coverage of IDW's G.I. Joe books because it was causing too much strife within the community to have these products be promoted and having these negative interactions with the writer. And that's as far as we took it. A lot of my statements regarding that were taken out of context by some other sites and things like that. And it was a very, very unpleasant situation. But what it came down to is we were just going to stop covering the press releases and the media for the comic book until IDW was going to resolve this issue with their marketing. You can't have a person using their name as a brand also promoting and supporting and using that identity to put out Hasbro products. These are products that are designed for collectors and children, and that content needs to be appropriate. And we just didn't feel that the content, the personal behavior was the issue. The content of the comic books was never in question. We never had an issue with that. It's fiction. Fiction is messy. It's a soap opera. It's going to have lots of changes and drama, and different, writers are going to come and they're going to go. And that's all well and fine. I don't think anybody really had an issue with content, but they did have an issue with the behavior of the writer and their interactions with the community. And that was our response. I didn't realize that it was going to turn into some of the things I didn't really want, which were boycotts, which were some very unpleasant comments that were made. We tried to distance ourselves from that. That's not what this was about. And ultimately, it worked out. What we wanted is what we got, which was that the writer was no longer using their personal social media as a marketing platform for G.I. Joe products. That they were no longer using their personal identity to market this brand that means a lot to the community. And from that, if that had an impact on sales, if that had an impact on anything else, well, that falls at the feet of the writer and the creative team at that point. If you're creating a product that people don't want to read, then that's a marketing and a public relations issue, and that's something I don't feel that YoJoe could take the blame for or responsibility for. We just said we were going to stop providing free coverage, and we left it at that, and that's kind of where I leave it today.
But I mean,
that is.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and that's well within your right as a site admin that is not, paid by Hasbro, that you are an independent entity. That is well within your right to do that. And it's interesting, you brought up a point that a lot of people, I think, missed in this whole thing, is that you had a writer that was using a personal brand channel, their social media account as their personal brand, to not only talk about their work, but also their personal opinions. And I'm reminded of the Nickelodeon Turtles cartoon. And I don't know if a lot of people are aware of this. They had a voice cast on that show. And I didn't watch the series, but I remember it was a Jason Schwartzman, who was a voice of one of the characters on the show. And Nickelodeon had in their press materials encouraged fans of the show to follow the voice actor's personal channels. And Mr. Schwartzman made, not realizing that his channel, his personal brand was, could affect people,
right,
made some very inappropriate comments for children about the wife of a presidential candidate at the time, and was fired from the show subsequently over that. So you took action based on something that is not without, there was a precedent for.
Right. You're not going to find my personal social media being a soapbox for like YoJoe, for the Hasbro brand. I would never do that, because it's poor judgment, I think, that you're going to take your personal opinions, your personal flavor of whatever, and try to mix that with a product that you're supporting. The moment you do that, you're putting a barrier between you and potential customers and clients. And that's it just isn't acceptable, especially with something that needs to be as universally accepted and loved as G.I. Joe is. We just felt that was a very big misstep on that part of the writer and on part of the company that had employed him as a freelance, as a freelancer, is not monitoring that, because that had been an issue, not just with G.I. Joe, but with other projects that person had been involved with as well.
Yes.
And so I think our response was measured, it was responsible, and it was done so in a way that it did exactly what we wanted. It brought eyes on the situation, and it hopefully brought a proper resolution that was what everybody wanted. I had some personal correspondence with some other people involved in this situation during that time, names I won't mention, but something we made very clearly is we did not want to see the writer lose their job. That's not what we wanted, because you don't mess with people's paychecks. That's not fair. Yeah. But there were some other options to resolve this, and they apparently were not what the writer wanted to do. I'm not privy to what went on after that, but let it be known that we did not want that person to lose their job. We just wanted a change in how they were going to handle their interactions with the community.
I think that makes a lot of sense. When you are tied to a brand, when you are the writer of a brand, in many cases, you are becoming the voice of that, or in the case of G.I. Joe, one of the voices for that brand, as you are breathing life into their characters. And as someone who is on media and doing things for GI Joe, I absolutely applaud the response that YoJoe took in this case. There was no scathing editorial. There was no personal attack. We live in an age where it's almost, in any kind of media, almost deemed accepted to blur in some cases the personal and the professional. And I thought on a personal level, I felt that YoJoe took a very mature stance in this. And it did, as you said, this created additional discussion in the fandom, the act of no longer covering it, but that is not YoJoe's response. With people boycotting the title, that was their decision. YoJoe never, and I really want to make that clear to anyone watching this, YoJoe never once called for a boycott of purchasing any of the IDW titles. No, so
that hurts Hasbro. That hurts the brand, and that is the last thing that we ever need to do, is to hurt the brand. I mean, we're all in this together, and a rising tide raises all ships. The more successful G.I. Joe is, the more successful YoJoe will be, the more successful our community is. And that's what we want. But at the same time, there are consequences for actions. And I think that's, we had to recognize that situation.
Granted, I know it wasn't what y'all wanted to be at the like a boycott, but I mean, on different outlets, I mean, it just went. People, I remember reading all these comments how people were like, I won't pick up another comic, I will not pick up that comic until he's gone. I mean, again, that's their right to do that.
Right.
I mean, that's probably you got to think that we're all patriotic, but I'm figuring Joe fans are probably more patriotic than some people are, because the backstory of GI Joe, and the comments that were made were focused towards an attack on the country that of course to this day leave a sour taste in everyone's mouth. Quick thing, Fred, you mentioned Jason Schwartzman. I think you meant Jason Biggs.
Jason Biggs, thank you. I knew it was a Jason. Like I said, I don't really watch the new Turtles show,
yeah,
so I apologize.
For people who don't know who he was the guy who banged a pie in American Pie. That's who that is. We won't say the actual word they called him, but he was that guy. He did say some stuff, and he was taken off and replaced by
Seth Green. I remember Seth Green.
Seth Green did, and you really couldn't tell too much of a difference, but you could tell a difference. And they played it all off in the car. I watched the cartoon, so they played it off as he had gotten choked in one episode, so it damaged his vocal cords, is what it was. And they ran with it. It was good. It was really good.
I'll be honest, I only tuned in for their Big Trouble in Little China homage, because that's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Gotcha.
And I remember noticing that's not the voice that was supposed to be there.
Yeah.
So again, I know that this was kind of a big touchy subject for a while, and there were people on, in the writer's side, there were people, in the fandom side, there was a lot of he said, she said, and I tonight, one of the things, and we talked about this before we went on the show, is, we kind of wanted just to give Terry a chance to say, hey, this was the decision that went behind it. And to really kind of set the record straight of exactly what YoJoe said and what and what their decision was, and not necessarily how it was taken in some of the opinion sites. And I mean, we're talking opinion sites well outside of the Joe community.
Oh, completely.
It was
far bigger than our community. And yeah, there were some comments that were made by some writers that I thought were a little unfair. But it is what it is. And our only concern now is that the G.I. Joe comic continues to be successful, and we've had some great success. Larry Hama is doing a wonderful job on his Real American Hero book. He's had 3 sold-out issues in a row now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And a second printing. That has not happened in a very long time in that title. I mean, that's like 1980s is the last time something like that happened.
Yeah.
So, that's where we want to put our energy towards something positive, that we want to see, Larry's continued success. And whatever IDW comes out with next, we're going to support, and we're going to, get behind and hope that that's also successful.
Yeah, I think the next book coming out is the $6 Million Man crossover.
Yes, and that is going to be a lot of fun. The
Which
art looks great. They stole Shannon Gallant from the Real American Hero title, so that's but they have a great replacement artist. So
I'm not gonna lie. When they first announced it, I was kind of puzzled because I always wanted to see Steve Austin in the Adventure Team as a not so closeted Adventure Team fan. But and I can't wait for these. I'm not gonna lie, I'll be hearing the sound effects in my head when he's running slowly and all of that. So,
it just dawned on me the music in my head as soon as you said that.
Oh, and again, kind of a segue because Terry described all the work that goes into adding in new entries into the database and fleshing out every time something is released. I'm sure that there's a little bit of chagrin in the staff of the YoJoe, the hearts of the YoJoe staff, whenever a new FSS shipment or the club releases something, is they're like, yes, new stuff. Oh crap! We gotta shoot all this. We have more database entries. Damn it!
And that's the thing, is that we don't get free samples usually from the club or from other places, so we have to wait just like everybody else. We get our shipment like everybody else, and then we have to rush over to the photo booth, take pictures of it carded, slice everything open, take all the photos of it disassembled, put it all together, put the stickers on the vehicles, put the figures together, and then get all those shots, all those pose shots, and then all the detail shots of the accessories, what the accessories look like when things are put together. It's a lot of work, and it takes about a day of photography and about 4 hours of photo editing to do a single figure.
Wow.
Yeah.
As someone who is woefully behind on reviews on his personal site, yeah, I get that. Is something new comes in and there's the excitement phase, and then there's but I got to do all this work before I get to enjoy it.
Yes, and and then we're trying to go back and redo all of the vintage items, and so. Like, was yesterday or the day before, we just got up the Ghost Striker X-16 from 1993. That's one of the big airplanes, and Phil did such a great job on that. If you can take a look at that right now, I mean, he did a phenomenal job. And
that plane is freaking sexy to begin with.
Oh, it's a F-16 and all of its glory back in the 90s. I mean, fantastic airplane. And then you put in the features with like it's got a little projector, so it can do like a glider on the wall or a Cobra aircraft, and it's got landing lights on it, and it's got like a spotlight, and it's missile launchers, and this was the last big airplane that was produced during the vintage line, and it's easily as good as a Sky Striker or a Rattler or any of the more famous aircraft. They just did a phenomenal job on this thing.
Yeah. Especially for a later line piece that doesn't get the love that some of the early vintage stuff does. Yeah. You get me out. Now I want to go home and play with my jets.
It's a great thing. And what's interesting is we're starting to get a lot more interest in these 1990s products at the tail end of the line. And you have the whole millennial thing going on now, where you have a lot of people that are looking back at their childhood in the 90s, and this was a big part of it from 1990 to 94. And so there's that interest again, like, wow, these are things that G.I. Joe didn't need to always be olive drab and super hardcore military. It could be fun and be a little sci-fi, but then it could still pull off stuff like this, which is just a state-of-the-art F-16 that was just. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, we had a lot of fun doing this archive entry for this thing.
I imagine that poor Phil is just like his camera, that shutter's just got to be on the verge of overheating at times as he's going back through and looking at the old entries and going, oh, why isn't this picture better? And then knowing that he has to update it and going through.
We've had to go back and update sometimes where Phil has his photography ability has just improved so much in the last few years. And so, yeah, we've gone back. We've done some things that may not have looked as good. We've redone those. And the problem is when it's something big, like when those 2-packs of vehicles were coming out, was it 2 years ago? So you had a Sky Striker and then another Sky Striker, and then all these big vehicles that don't fit in a smaller photo booth. You have to, like build things out. You're using printer paper as background, just trying so you can Photoshop it out later. And then like with the Ghost Striker, it's gray on white. And so it's really hard to not wash out the details or, to do all the photo editing. It just takes a lot of time. But yeah.
Ugh. Well, yeah, again, our hats off to you guys for, again, all the work, and not just on A Real American Hero, but as one of 5 Sergeant Savage fans out there, and, and even as someone who personally, I was never into international figures. I just wasn't. It wasn't my jam. That's not disparaging them. But as the club has been sprinkling in more and more international, then I started going through and it's like, oh man, YoJoe, I knew YoJoe had those sections. So even all of that, like this was not a linear rabbit hole for you guys, to just start adding product. There's all the branches and the spider webbing and, the related lines and, as you said earlier, even like the Comic-Con sets, that now because Rom the Space Knight has some Joe parts in him, and
you go look at 2017 in the database, you're going to see Rom the Space Knight and, who was it? So many of these different characters like Leo and Matt Trekker and so on and so on. And these are all in the G.I. Joe brand now because it's a combined Hasbro universe and it's technically a G.I. Joe product. And same reason why we have the Street Fighter line. We have a section that we call not G.I. Joe figures under our collectibles database. And in there you have all of those little sidelines that Hasbro did that were G.I. Joe involved, like Mortal Kombat, which something I learned recently is that first wave of Mortal Kombat was originally going to carry the G.I. Joe branding like the first wave of Street Fighter figures. So technically, those would have been G.I. Joes. And then something went on with the licensing with Midway at the time, and that was backed out of. But yeah, you have so many different brands that G.I. Joe grew out of. Street Fighter movie line was a lot of that we found out recently through some research is that was supposed to be the second wave of the G.I. Joe Street Fighter line, and they got moved into the movie line.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Packaging mock-ups and some things like that exist. So, I mean, the idea for G.I. Joe in the 90s, and this was the genius of Kirk Blazigian, is let G.I. Joe be an umbrella brand and put other really popular brands underneath. G.I. Joe, you can have any of those Kenner brands that were available at the time since they were owned by Hasbro. You could have had Alien versus Predator G.I. Joe, and you could have had Terminator G.I. Joe, and so on. All these movie brands, all these things could have fit under that umbrella had some different corporate decisions been made. And that was a very brilliant idea that Kirk had at the time. And something I think that G.I. Joe could be.
What could have been?
It's still an idea. I think it has merit. G.I. Joe is one of the top 100 most recognizable brands in the United States. When you put that name G.I. Joe up, what other brands are standing next to it? When you look at that, that's Coca-Cola, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. All these really huge, well-known brands, and G.I. Joe's sharing space with that. There's a lot of life I think we have left in this line to go.
There was an article recently, and it was published by social media guru. It was sent to me recently, I should say. It was published in the last couple of years, and it was by social media guru Neil Patel, and it was on content marketing. And I Facebook the other day, and he opened up, and it opens up with the cover of G.I. Joe Marvel Comics #1. And Neil's comment was, do you know what this is? This is content marketing. And he went in and he described Kirk's strategy, the strategy that Kirk and the team put in place of, we have a comic book. We couldn't do animated commercials for a toy at the time, but we could do animated commercials for the comic book. And how G.I. Joe is, and this is just the Real American Hero era. As you saw in the Netflix series, I mean, G.I. Joe, the brand, they had 45 minutes to tell the story of a brand that defined the term action figure in the 60s and that put Hasbro on the map, not once, but twice.
Saved that company.
2 different incarnations.
It saved the company from folding twice.
Yes.
Yep.
And, now, I mean, I'm someone in my 40s. I work in an ad agency, and I have a lot of younger coworkers in their 20s. They may not know specific characters. They may not know storylines, but when they see some of the decorations that are over here in the corner on this side of the office of G.I. Joe, they recognize the brand.
Absolutely. And
that is, like you said, that is a thing where, if decisions are made, G.I. Joe could come back with, tangential lines for collectors and yet still have a core focus for kids. I'm not gonna lie, I would have killed for G.I. Joe Expendables. Not exactly kid friendly, but
yeah. I've always felt that the G.I. Joe brand has a lot of life left in it, but what keeps it alive is it has to change. And the problem with today is so many people love G.I. Joe as it was in the 80s. It's very hard for them to accept a change to the brand. And we need to move past this, Sunbow cartoon, goofy, Real American Hero concept that's very campy, very, childlike. And it needs to move on to a different property, something that maybe is geared towards a different age group or just reflects the current times. And you're not going to do that if the community keeps just holding on tightly to that 1980s Real American Hero concept. And so, that's Hasbro's next challenge, I think, is nostalgia is fine. Nostalgia is great. Nostalgia isn't going to grow. A 20-something has no emotional connection to G.I. Joe. It was
and like
when they were children.
Go ahead, Terry.
I was going to say, a millennial doesn't have an emotional connection to the brand because it was gone by the time they were, born. And so, what do we need to do to do that? To rebuild those links, and that's Hasbro's challenge.
And as you said too, for everyone that thinks of G.I. Joe as the 1980s and a Real American Hero, we in many cases, we're not the first iteration. Our fandom is not the first iteration of G.I. Joe at all, and there was a time at the Joe, for some people may not realize this. There was a time when you'd go to the Joe convention, and Terry's laughing at this.
Yeah.
And 3 3/4 and Real American Hero guys were the minority of the crowd there.
Look down.
And I can still remember, even as recent as 2005 in Minneapolis, there were still more 12-inch people than there were 3 3/4. We were in the minority, and some of the 12-inch guys, God love them, but they were at that point what I think a Real American Hero fans are kind of now, where they're like, no, that they were uncomfortable by the thought of it continuing and changing, and seeing their numbers decrease. And look, the next iteration of G.I. Joe, if you're going to grow a fandom and you're going to bring in the next generation, and poor Mike's over there like, God, he's on his soapbox again. It has to appeal.
When you just talk about Tiger Force, that's what I'm waiting on.
Tiger Force is dead.
No.
But the next iteration of G.I. Joe has to appeal, or G.I. Joe has to appeal to that next generation of fans. And it has to be, and it's, Real American Hero was very timely. It was a perfect 1980s era, incarnation of the brand. Whereas Adventure Team was very much a 1970s era incarnation. And, even God love it, Super Joe was an attempt to try to capitalize on the shift to science fiction interest that was happening with things like Star Wars and in 2001 and the black hole and all of this occurring at that time in the 70s. And so, you know, the next era of Joe is going to have to be relatable to kids that grew up in an era where the internet was always present, where cell phones were part of the world, and where there's not a Cold War. You know, there's not this Iron Curtain, and where, you know, Cobra could be an analogy in many minds to the forces of the Soviets and the Chinese and all that as they were in the 80s. Forward to seeing what they can do with it.
Today's children have all been born after 9/11. They have only known a time of high security, of counterterrorism. That is a great formula for a G.I. Joe product to take something a little bit from reality, tone it down so it's not as topical, not as, you know, scary as it could be, and make it, there's a lot of room. Like I said, there's a lot of room for our current environment and the current times. It's a great opportunity for G.I. Joe, but it's going to need, just like we had with a comic book and a cartoon of the 80s, it needs what today's media is to push it forward. And that's not going to be a comic book, and it's not going to be a TV show. And so what's it going to be? A movie's great, but a movie's only going to get you maybe 24 months. So we need something. You need something long-standing. A Netflix series is a great idea. There's lots of things, you know, a video game is a good idea, something that has growth potential that they can build out, you know, as it progresses. There's lots of things that Hasbro can do to keep the brand going. And, you know, while we're sitting here talking about it, we know that that's being worked on as we speak. So it's going to be very interesting in the next couple of years to see what happens.
A few things here. I want to some comments and everything. I actually got a message through the Facebook that we were talking about the Aubrey situation. She had stated that, or Diana, which I'm surprised, I didn't know she listened to the show. I appreciate you listening. She was glad that there was the debate as presented as an adult way, and this is definitely done in a very sane, calm, and down-to-earth way, meaning that, you know, there's always two sides to every story and everyone's opinion, and that we weren't here to, you know, we're not here to bash him by any means. And like you said, we weren't here. We don't want to see someone lose their job by any means, but, you know, every, you know, someone up the food chain seems to think that, you know, that they didn't find it, you know, it's out of our control. You know, we just have our opinions, you know, just like everyone else does. Also, in the chat, hold on a second, let me go over this real quick before I jumped on the soapbox again. Cookie Bricks, I'm sorry, I don't know his name. It's Cookie Bricks on here. He said, just subscribed for a year. Happy to support YoJoe.com.
That's great.
Christopher Kelly, he had a question on the topic of the brand moving forward. Would you guys be supportive of our Real American Hero characters being shifted to leadership and trainer roles with new characters for the next generation as the new team?
Well, sure. I mean, that's what they did in 84, 85, 86. The G.I. Joe movie 87 was to retire the old toys, the old characters, and to bring in new characters. Yeah, that's G.I. Joe has always been in a constant state of evolution. You know, I think I look forward to new characters. I think we all should. New characters or new toys.
And then Eric, the administrator of Cobra Island, LOL, he was laughing at me and Fred talking about Tiger Force.
It's never going to die, dude. It's never going to die, unfortunately. It needs to.
Oh, just wait till JoeCon, buddy. It's going to be so long. We're going to have such a field day at JoeCon. And that's another thing.
You know what?
I wanted to throw out there real quick. You know, Fred knows this, and I think I've mentioned it once or twice. That, you know, I've been pushing towards Savage for a couple of things for JoeCon, and, you know, I wanted to wait till after the new year and write him a nice little email. And, wish them happy holidays and happy New Year. And hey, by the way, JoeCon's coming up down the road, and and for people who went to JoeCon last year, and you're part of the golden ticket, there's always been the special print for JoeCon for the golden ticket recipients. And last year there wasn't one. It was basically the same thing that was sold within the club store. As a golden ticket recipient, you spend that kind of money, I just didn't agree with it. So I had, lent my, I know some people who are artists, real good friends of mine, that have done work for the club before in the past, actually. And I have a guy lined out to do a special print, and told him that, hey, no cost to you, out of my pocket. I'll have it all printed up, bring it to the show, blah, blah, blah. And he said no.
Well,
but
he
didn't say I couldn't do something unofficial.
There is a proud history at JoeCon of really cool unofficial things being given away.
Yes.
And one of those was done by a semi-frequent guest of ours on here, who may or may not rhyme. Well, I can't even come up with a rhyme for James Kavanaugh. There is a proud history of that, and and the guys at Roma Collectibles, and the list goes on and on. Of the one thing I will, the one thing I will say about our fandom is we have passionate content creators. We really do, and we have people that love this brand and will spend their time and their money and their effort to create something that helps promote a brand that they have zero equity in.
That's right.
The things I love about this darn fandom. So
with that said, be on the lookout for me at JoeCon, and Fred. Something I talk about Fred, but we'll be handing out some unofficial prints
cool.
I'm putting together something special, and then y'all can take those prints, and once they start announcing guests who will be incorporated in the print, then you can go by and get their autograph with that. It's something that I'm working on, and we'll throw Fred's name in there because he's part of the show.
And remember, kids, if you see Mike approaching you at JoeCon, a restraining order is good for 50 feet.
That's
all right, Mike. I know you're itching to talk about it.
I can't. I'm trying to think of something to come up with, and I can't. I'm eating a sandwich, and you're insulting my intelligence.
I know you're itching to do it. What? You want to do some screen share and take a look at the pictures we have?
Yeah, we're definitely going to do some of that. So
there's a couple of things, and Terry, you're welcome to join us as we just kind of talk about our reactions to these. But we've had. Originally, we were only going to have one thing to talk about, and that is the Dreadnought four-wheel drive and Heart Wrencher pictures. Because the pre-order went live this week, which woohoo! And then the club put up some new photography of that as well on the order and on their Facebook page. And then this afternoon, Mike sends me a picture that yes, I'm 5 shipments behind now on reviews. The next FSS wave is dropping.
What are you seeing? You seeing my page here on his?
Yep.
Okay.
Mike does screen share, and it gets interesting.
Well, I'm actually getting better at it now. But we were hoping that we would have some kind of JoeCon news, information reveal. We don't. They haven't given us anything. But I did this yesterday where if you look back on last year's, you'll see that the first reveal of 2017 was on January 20th, which was the third Friday of January. This coming Friday is the third Friday. Brochure didn't go up till a week after that. 4 days later, registration went up, which they were very firm in saying that they were going to have registration up in January last year. Now, that was last year. Maybe this year they're just going to throw it out the window, and we're going to have a repeat of 2015.
We'll get there.
Where it's going to be like 2 weeks beforehand. So take it for what it is, people. Nothing yet. No brochure, no reveal, no hints.
Hey,
a lot of people are thinking this.
Today is only the 13th, so I'm willing to. I'm going to give the club some time, and until it's like 10:30 p.m. Central Time on January 31st, and I'm like, club, club, it's getting time. Let's face it, we're all impatient fans.
We are.
We just want to know. We just want to know who's coming in the set.
Well, I mean,
We
it's
really
just not
do.
that. It's, the New Year's here. Good Lord, I got a lot of messages. The New
I would
Year.
say, Mike, you're sharing everything.
Well, I'm not trying to. I mean, all these
Hey, kids, if you look really carefully, you can get Mike's bank account numbers.
you ain't gonna get much out of it.
You can PayPal all money to Fred at Joe Battle Lines.
Okay. Probably should went to Joe Battle Lines. That's probably a better picture. Matter of fact, I'm gonna go to Joe Battle Lines. Oh, but here's one. This is one for Fred. If y'all didn't see this on the Facebook page.
Oh boy.
Since Fred wants to get married.
Yeah.
She's punching him in the face and saying, "Stop looking at G.I. Joes. Why can't you look at porn like a regular husband?"
Look, my better half knows she is incredibly patient. In the fact that when we were house hunting, I had to carve off a small room in the basement somewhere. That was for the Joe stuff, and she actually, I was just content to throw in some crappy shelves. She encouraged me to get the nice track shelving and really build the wall up. So I got zero complaints. I got friends who, man, when they got married, they had to ditch a lot of stuff, and that to me just sets a bad precedent to begin with. It should be your choice, not something that's ever forced upon you. So,
there we go. Courtesy of Joe Battle Lines, he got a picture the club posted for him of the heart wrencher, repainted stinger. What we got here?
I'm digging it, man. They confirmed it's a new head on heart wrencher.
Mm-hmm.
We do have, is heart wrencher a 1-to-1 match for the comics? No, but find me the legs that exist that are a 1-to-1 match. They don't exist, guys.
There you go. I've been watching the boards on this. Our good friend Rick, Shatterglass Jazz, he messages me the pictures. He's like, "Man, you seen this yet?" And he shows me the pictures, and I'm like, "Where the hell did you get this at?" "Oh, my club magazine that he got like a week and a half ago, it feels like." And just like I think Fred says before, he got the Mafia money, man. I think
Rick's got mob ties.
He tell you what, I mean, he got that club magazine, and he lives in Virginia. I'm a 4-hour drive away from the club's office. How is it that someone in Virginia, through all the snow and everything, gets a club magazine before me on clear roads? But anyways, he did send us some pictures. We posted those. This is pretty much 95% positive. I mean, this is the most positive thing I've heard the fandom talk about in a while, to be honest with you. I mean, they're very excited about the vehicle. A lot of them are actually excited. There's people who are getting, they're like, "Hey, I pre-ordered 2, I pre-ordered 3, I pre-ordered 4." They're troop building the vehicle of all things.
Well, they've sold through 1/3 of the production run as of today.
Yeah. So don't wait, people. You got to think, this is the last year of the club. They're not going to go and get these huge numbers like they have before in the past. They don't want to be stuck with this stuff and have a big, huge 90% off sale like they did with the Transformers Club towards the end of last year. Now, granted, I have not ordered mine yet, which I need to. The only thing I hate about pre-orders is you got to pay it up front and still wait. It's just the part of the business. I understand it, but I mean, we as fans, I mean, if you're wanting to get it, they're 1/3 of the way through. Don't waste any time. Now,
and I have to say, I'm kind of happy that it's not a 1-to-1 repaint of the original.
Mm-hmm.
That where the original had the black body, they went with the purple this time. I like the fact that makes this release look visually a little more unique.
It blends in with 2004 releases as well from the
yes, it does.
Yes.
I really want him to do the Ram. I'm not going to lie. I want my companion Ram cycle so freaking desperately now because, in 86, man, I never got that original set. I had to procure it years later. And the Stinger, well, the Vamp's my favorite vehicle of all time, followed by the Ram's in my top 5. And having those two repainted for Dreadnought in 86, that was crazy cool. But come on, guy, Club, if you're listening, and I know it's not always feasible, if you could squeeze out one more release and give me the Ram, I swear I'll come and I'll detail your car. I'll do whatever it takes, guys. I mow lawns, Brian, if you're listening.
But yeah, there were some questions. There were some close-up pictures. Someone had pointed out that the head and body had 2 different skin tones. I'm pretty sure these are mock-ups.
We've seen that before. You know, I'm willing to give it to him. I have a feeling that the final product will not come and she will not look like her head was ripped off of someone else and plopped on.
And that's what, you have to, a lot of collectors, you have to get through to them was, you've got to get through their head that, these are mock-ups. People see these. Look at Battle Force 2000 last year. People were going berserk because of all these pictures, and then the figures turned out pretty decent looking. Yep.
I like the midriff tattoo, by the way. That's a cool little addition.
Yeah. But
I was like, wait a minute, is that what I think it is? I'm blowing the picture up. I'm like, it's awesome. All
right, and now we're going to go back to the other page, and this is a spoiler. And if y'all don't want to know what the figures were from shipment number 4, if I ever get this thing to go, slow ass computer.
I understand that people want to be surprised. To me, we already know what the lineup is. But for those of you who don't want to know what the next FSS shipment is, this is the part of the show where you can, if for the 5 of you still watching, hi Mom, you can drop off now.
And I want to actually thank Carlos. I can't pronounce his name correctly. Carlos
Salinas.
During my Facebook ban, he messages or he sends the picture of the box, and I can't respond to it on any forum whatsoever. And it was killing me. I had to pull over to the side of the road. But he posted this right here, not that. Go away. He posted the picture of his box on for tonight's show, picture that you had done. And so he had posted that, the box, and then he was trying to post the pictures on a Hiss, and he didn't know how to use it. And me, as the gracious person I am, I put my phone number on there. I'm like, hey, send me the pictures and I'll post it for you. So like not even 5 minutes later, I get a text message with the pictures of the figures. So this is the first figure.
Woohoo, Rampart.
And he had sent me some, let's see if I can find them.
I got to say, I'm digging Rampart.
He sent me some pictures of it out of package too. And this one here, I'm glad we got this one. I was really hoping for the Worm, is what I was really wanting. But I would definitely take the Cobra Officer on this one.
The Night Stalker Commander. Well, because, we don't know when the club is releasing the Night Stalker 3-pack this year. So it's kind of nice to have the Commander out first. She was just in this month's comic.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that these were from probably my favorite O-Ring convention set originally. Thanks for the Memories was just
yes.
That was box perfection. I'm not gonna. There's not one bad piece in that whole set, and the fact the club came back and gave us the Generation 3 or modern style Night Stalkers. Yeah, okay, kudos guys. Because I'm one of the people, I like the female officer 3-pack. I know they're not as realistic in the way the uniform fits certain parts of the female anatomy. I view them as like the J. Scott Campbell female Cobra Troopers, and that's fine. So I think the club did a real solid. This is a solid ship. I was hoping Sub-Zero only because it's freezing cold out here, and I actually had snow on the ground to shoot him. But that, how often do you get an Arctic figure actually in the winter? It doesn't usually happen. So
what was it there, like 1 degrees? You kept posting it on Facebook.
Oh, I was like -2, and I'm going.
Yeah.
That's pre-wind chill, and I'm going to work.
Oh my
And
God.
I have a corner office. It's the beautiful splendor I'm sitting in, and we don't have a lot of insulation behind those closet doors, so I have a little space heater that I always blasting. And I was like, man, the one day it was snowing like crazy, and I looked out my window, and there's this little area that's like perfect to shoot photos in.
Yeah.
You know, because when you're a Joe Cut guy, you do that. Everything's a place to shoot a picture and figure. And I kept going, man, that'd be a great spot to get Sub-Zero in. And then I realized, just my luck, Sub-Zero is going to come like after all the snow is done for the season. It'll be the guy in all white standing in the mud going, oh, crap. So,
but yeah.
No, I think this is a good shipment. Terry, what are your thoughts on it? I mean, you know.
I think Rampart is one of those few overlooked figures that finally, like the 1990, 91, 92 figure styles are getting some fan appreciation, which you know, they've been overlooked for so long. And Rampart was so cool with that large machine gun and then the rocket launcher. It was just a great figure. And, you know, to get a modern implementation. And you could tell Rampart was coming when you looked at was Blocker from this year's concept. You know, it was a perfect, you know, multi-use head that they had waiting for it. So I think they did a great job. It's going to be.
Someone actually asked. I think they were saying that was Blocker's head from the convention set.
Yeah.
Yep.
They were like, "Does he have his eyebrows?"
Well, he's got goggles on though. See, he's got goggles. So this time, so we I'm assuming they have to be.
Well, then they want to know if his eyebrows are underneath it. But the guy, Carlos, did say that the rocket launcher is not spring activated, so it doesn't have.
No, that's
or is it?
Pursuit of Cobra, the good Pursuit of Cobra Duke.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, okay then. All right.
Which that's another accessory that a lot of people kind of forget about, and I love that accessory. Pursuit of Cobra just gave us some of the best stuff all the way around. So keep mining that, club.
The machine gun that they included with Rampart is really cool. That looks like a Armalite Stoner 63. So it's kind of a Vietnam era machine gun. That's really cool. That kind of deep.
Yeah, because isn't that the same? Oh shoot. I'm trying to remember the original pictures of him because picture one more time. I know I'm asking you to do technical stuff, and that usually gets me into trouble. No, maybe it's not what I thought it was. Because at one point I was thinking it might have been one of the guns that came with the DTC Falcon. Yeah, I think it did. Terry, didn't that gun, the gray one that's on the bottom of the card there, didn't that originally come with DTC Falcon?
I'd have to take a look. Let me see here.
I think it might have. Because Falcon had that unusual machine. He had a machine gun that was new. Again, I'm one of 7 people that like DTC. And Valor versus Venom, and y'all can suck it. Or I'm sorry, Tony Thorpe.
You suck it.
So, Falcon.
We know the person I'm talking to. Hi, Bobby.
Good old Bobby.
Bobby hates that era.
Does he?
He hates it.
It's not Steel Brigade.
Anyway, it's probably not worth wasting a ton of time on, but I was like, man, Rampart, there's no bad to that. Like FSS, the club's really notched up their game.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, also, we'll cover that one. We're going to look over here to this tab. Y'all remember we had a Carson on a couple of times in the past as Kickstarters and 3D Joes and everything. And he started another one, and I'm not sure this is. Let me refresh it. But we were going to ask him to come on and push this Kickstarter, one more time. And there's no need to him to have to come here and push it. It's already hit, and it's like 300%. I think it was last I looked on my phone. But
hey, I'm just gonna say, if anybody is on the fence about supporting Carson's collecting the art of G.I. Joe, even though it's past its goal, these books, I phrase this and not sound like I'm just a complete creeper. Okay, look, we know that basically G.I. Joe had some of the most brilliant packaging art ever back in the day. It was just gorgeous. And these books are these books are like sex on the page, man. I mean, the artwork in there is just so amazing. And so when you flip through these, it is like going back to when you were a kid standing in the store looking at the packages and seeing those figures painted on the vehicles, and your imagination is just firing on all cylinders. And these books are basically page after page of that, lovingly recreated for your viewing pleasure. So support these guys. You're not going to want to miss these. You know, I discovered, sadly, I'm missing one of them, and so I have to order it now. I don't know how I missed it, but
this is
these books are incredible.
This is going to be the cover of Volume 5, and that was already hit, and you know the goal on that one. And then the next goal that they had set was for Volume 6, which I think this cover here is pretty badass. I like it a lot. And then also they also hit the other goal for the slip cover, which will collect all 1 through 6.
Yeah.
So, like me, I did one. All right, I did 5 and 6, and I'll get the slip cover, and then I'm gonna go back and get 1 through 4. But if you look here, the 6 books, there is one here for all 6 volumes, $180, and get you 1 through 6 with the slip cover. But I think if I'm correct, you'll have to wait till December to get all 6 of them. But I think he had told me in a message that if you pay a little extra, he'll go ahead and send the other books out first. I think it's like $10 extra. And so he'll go ahead and send you out like 1 through 5 when 5 goes out. And then you'll have the luxury of looking through all that great artwork through the first 5 volumes until December, and then you'll get your 6th one. So
totally worth it. And it's,
if you know, seen the stuff, it's awesome. The posters I've seen at JoeCon, they are great. So you'd be definitely.
I have the USS Flag life-size poster framed hanging up in my living room.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I helped procure the artwork for that for him. So
cool.
That was YoJoe's little contribution to the very first or second. It was the second book.
Second book, yeah. I think he told us a little about that when, you know, how like trimming it off of the front of a, you know, having this thing that was trimmed off of the front of a box and having to take it to a scanner and piece it together. And
well, and the funny thing is, do you know where the artwork came from? It was from one of the very first well-known G.I. Joe collectors. It was Thomas Wheeler, who in 1985 peeled that off the box, and then I bought it from Thomas and sent it over to Carson for digital restoration.
Jeez.
Yep, you did a great.
You know, they don't do packaging like that anymore. And I remember when we had Kirk Bazigian on the show, and, you know, again, we're not besmirching anything that Hasbro's done now, because I know there are economic realities in play. But you look at like G.I. Joe Retaliation, and all the artwork was just the same. Every package was just the Rock and Snake Eyes. And you go back and you look in the 80s and the 90s, and every package had a unique piece of artwork on it. And that's incredible.
What they did in 2009 with Rise of Cobra and then the Pursuit of Cobra line, doing that with the vehicles, I thought was so great. You go look at that new Vamp in that box, and it's everything I had ever hoped they would do with the line. It is the same but better in every way. And, you know, the market's there. They could do it, but it depends on who's in marketing at the time and who makes that decision. Yeah. The artwork, that's one of the big parts of G.I. Joe. I've always felt the artwork is critical. And you talk to 12-inch collectors, they say the same thing. Those 12-inch, you know, the oil paintings that they used for the packaging on the 12-inch figure boxes, those are iconic and definitive. Yeah, it's... I
mean, that's what sold it in the store.
Yep.
You know, it was not a picture of, it wasn't a clear plat. You know, I always felt we lost something in like even in Valor versus Venom, which I love that era, but everything was the clear plastic and you could see the vehicle. It wasn't the same. It wasn't the same as this amazing painted, dynamic, gung ho's not included as the driver, but he's still riding on the side of the Ostriker. There's just something about those paintings where, you feel like it's a snapshot from a story that's happening, and you want to buy that toy, and you want to carry that. You want to, reenact that, and that's just it's amazing. So,
another thing I want, since we talked about Carson, mine's been delayed, I think, because of the weather, but if you pushed the Girl of the Finest, their contribution for the calendar, those should be hitting mailboxes here now. Yep. Have you gotten yours, Fred?
Yep, got mine last week.
Did you get yours last week? Man, I guess mine's just snail mail.
Mike, it's because they don't like Mike. It's because of the Facebook ban.
Because of the what?
I'm just teasing you, dude. I'm just busting your chops.
Yeah, I think because of the snow. Mine was supposed to be here today, but I think it's held up somewhere. Is what the deal is on that one. But so that should be, people should be getting that one. I've seen pictures of it online. It looked really good from what I saw of it.
Well, gentlemen, we've been at this for an hour and 45 minutes.
And Fred's ready to go before I am. What?
Well, no, I didn't know people were still watching.
We have 15 viewers watching right now.
Hi, Mom. So, again, though, I want to make certain we include this so that if we keep talking, to kind of recap tonight, if you find YoJoe to be a valuable resource, which, let's face it, if you have a pulse on collect G.I. Joe, you do, you can help support the site by the figure collection, the collection tracking, and that is $3 a month if you do it for 1 year. So please, if you at all can give up one Starbucks run or one double cheese at McDonald's or whatever your vice is, come on, show YoJoe some love, because we want to keep that site online for all of us as a resource. And the same goes with the Kickstarters. Again, we love Com. So his Kickstarter, even though it's funded, he's still got 9 days to go. And stretch goals are a wonderful thing. So feel free to kick in, get some killer art books. You can find out more about that by following 3djoes.com on Facebook, or by going over to the website, or just searching it on Kickstarter. And if you want to help Mike's Tiger Force addiction. Oh, wait a minute. No, never mind.
Oh, but we're going to have so much fun at JoeCon this year. I figure worst case scenario, because I have asked for a panel for us, and his answer to that was that he wasn't for sure if they're going to do another panel, which they didn't do a podcast panel last year. If they don't, then we'll just find us a bar somewhere and we'll just set up and do our own and start flagging people down. I've actually got a lot of people say how entertaining it was watching me jump up and run and catch people. Hey, come here, get over here, you. I mean, when I got Brad, literally when I jumped up, I ran down the hall, across the little like circular thing to catch up with him. I'm like, hey, Brad, come over here, we're doing the show. Man, I was looking for you down there. I didn't see you nowhere. I'm over here.
I tell you what, we're just going to say now that we're going to find a spot somewhere outside the dealer's room on Saturday out there, and anybody who wants to stop by, and you can join two bearded guys talking about G.I. Joe.
Wearing Tiger Force shirts.
One of us.
I'm getting a Tiger Force shirt. Joe, if you're listening, Joe Colton, I need to know where to find some Tiger Force shirts. For me and Fred. Fred wants Tiger Force.
Terry, I don't know if you haven't caught all the past episodes during the JoeCon one. I told Mike unequivocally if he would get Brian Savage to appear on the show in any capacity, I would wear a Tiger Force shirt for the next 5 weeks. He did. It was 2 seconds of Savage.
Of him telling him
Doesn't matter. Savage stopped on.
That's
And
right.
so now I had a Tiger Force Outback T-shirt made, and then I ordered the club's Tiger Force concept because I'm not a Tiger Force guy. Every review I've ever done of Tiger Force starts off with, "I'm not a big fan of Tiger Force," and God love it, Mike's just never going to let that die.
He came on there. He leaned over the top of the computer, and he was like, "Hey, you lost that bet," and walked off. That's pretty much the only thing he said.
Oh, Brian.
Yeah.
What have I ever done to you? So, all right, gentlemen. Well, again, because I know I'm gonna have to hop off here in a bit. I'd like to thank Terry for coming on tonight and for talking YoJoe. It really, and again, not just because you're here, but when you think of the online Joe community, YoJoe is the elder statesman. YoJoe, it's our Smithsonian. It is our Library of Congress. It is our definitive online resource, and we are incredibly lucky to have it. And to everyone that helps you, and you and Phil and every single person, thank you guys on behalf of Mike and I for all that you do with that. Because
thank you.
Can't tell you how many hours I've logged in on that place. I love it.
Yeah, used it many times. And
Mike.
No, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
No, damn kids mess with my hair.
What hair?
Exactly. Well, I haven't shaved. Like little fuzz. It's kind of like the fuzz off one of the 12-inch figures. You have the little small fuzz, and she goes by, just rubs her head through it real quick and runs off. So, I lost my train of thought. I know Fred had sent me an email. We're looking into guests throughout the year. What we're going to try to do, So, as if you are someone in the Joe community who makes a contribution, like YoJoe does here and other stuff, hit me or Fred up. If you want to get your what you do out there, and let us know, and we can try to work you on the show. I know we have some ideas of people we want to get on the show this year again, or new people this year, and then of course we'll do our regular stuff as far as the club stuff once we see something for JoeCon. And then of course we'll do our JoeCon episode at JoeCon in June. So if there's anything y'all want us, or even anything you want us to talk about, our comments or our opinions on stuff, give us some ideas, because man, we can only do so much and think of so much to do at a time.
Unless you want Bobby Valla on again to hear him and I rant about Rise of Cobra. If you have suggestions of guests, Mike and I are always willing to listen.
Yep.
And I will tell you, there is one former comic writer we have tried to get on recently. He is not able to be on here. I would love to say that it would be like almost a master and apprentice style session of listening to him speak. But sadly, that one's not going to work out for the time being. But again, if you're anyone that's worked on it, we love talking Joe, and we love listening to some of it. We had Kirk on, and I swear I could just listen to Kirk Bazigian talk for hours.
Oh yeah,
because he is. And if you have not watched The Toys That Made Us on Netflix, Kirk's story of Stephen Hassenfeld deciding to go forward with the line, hands down, best part of the whole series. That man can tell a story.
Yep,
so.
he is very good. And then if you really want to watch something interesting, watch the Barbie one. There's some weird stuff on the Barbie.
Oh, yeah.
Them Barbies, boy. I've been seeing that picture everywhere. And I'm even like, someone was like, maybe she shed her skin or something. Who knows?
That creepy chair behind the former
Yeah, that's
so Terry's reaction. Yeah, I know he did.
Very strange. Very strange.
You would think that,
and the fact that it's just right there in frame. It's kind of like my office skeleton, except for it's like a person's skin.
Yeah, it was. I was like, wow, it was very interesting. Like, what the hell? So, but we will be on 2 weeks from tonight, and I know we will have some JoeCon news to talk about, and you'll get to hear our talks about everything. And even who knows, Bobby seems to want to come on a regular basis. He likes it, man. He loves talking GI Joe. I know Rick will be ready to talk some JoeCon stuff when they start revealing some stuff. And I know Rick will be there for the show in June. So, but I guess we'll go ahead and get off here, and appreciate everyone jumping in. You can find me here, or you can find me next week on G1 Hexaron channel for Cybercast and Galactic Gumbo, and then you can catch me and Fred in 2 weeks back here talking more Joe talk with somebody, or we'll be talking by ourselves. Who knows what the hell we'll be doing.
Mike will be talking to a stuffed tiger because it's the closest he can get to having a Tiger Force interview.
I think this is starting to get a little ridiculous now.
Oh, it's beyond ridiculous.
Oh, it is beyond ridiculous. Everyone gets a kick out of hearing us talk and argue about Tiger Force.
All right. Well, again, thanks for everyone who tuned in tonight. Special thanks to our special guest, Terry Dizard.
Yes.
And again, if you want to help out at YoJoe, contact Terry. You never know where that could lead. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.